Just earlier this week, I was watching the news, and I saw a segment on the news about something called cryotherapy. I don't know if anybody saw that. I don't know if you've ever heard of cryotherapy. Anybody experienced cryotherapy? Not a single hand anywhere. Now, cryotherapy is not when you curl up in a ball in the corner of your room or under your blanket and bawl your eyes out for an hour, although that is very therapeutic as well. Cryotherapy is a treatment for medical and general health issues that requires you to climb inside a tank up into your neck while they blast liquid nitrogen into the air and cool the temperature around your body to levels around minus 100 degrees Celsius. And it's kind of like an extreme ice bath, only much colder and much shorter. Because an ice bath takes about 20 minutes, a session in the cryotherapy tank takes about 3. Because needless to say, if you stayed any longer, you would die. And apparently, cryotherapy is really good for you because it reduces your stress levels and your anxiety and your depression by releasing endorphins. It increases your circulation. It strengthens your immune system. It speeds up your metabolism, so it reduces weight. It reduces cellulite. It improves the production of collagen. And a single session in the cryotherapy tank will allow you to lose up to 800 calories. How many of you like the sound of cryotherapy right now? That's like an hour workout in the gym. Now, needless to say, there is almost no scientific evidence to back any of that up. But cryotherapy is a growing treatment, growing in popularity because, of course, everybody wants a quick fix. Everybody wants a fast track to where they want to go. Everybody wants a microwave solution. And why stand in the gym, the hot, sweaty gym, for an hour when you can stand in a cryotherapy tank for 3 minutes and get the same results? So cryotherapy. Now, over the course of the last 8 weeks, we've been in the series together called Fully Devoted, and we've been talking about what full devotion to Jesus looks like. And in the course of the conversation, we have spoken about our commitment to prayer and to worship and to fellowship and to discipleship and to baptism and to creating community and to being in the world but not of the world, and it's been a wonderful conversation. But tonight I want to wrap up this conversation by speaking about the journey to full devotion. The journey to full devotion, because how many of you know nobody goes from 0 to fully devoted in a day? There is no spiritual cryotherapy treatment for full devotion. Even people who have had dramatic conversion experiences, people like the Apostle Paul, we read of his journey in Acts chapter 9. At the time he was called Saul, and he was on his horse on his way down to a place called Damascus. He was a Jewish religious leader, and he was persecuting Christians, and he was on his way to Damascus to persecute some more. And on the way down, the Bible tells us Jesus appears to him visibly and speaks to him audibly, knocks him to the ground, strikes him blind, and says, "Saul, why are you persecuting me? Get up and follow me." Now, how many of you know when God himself appears to you visibly, speaks to you audibly, knocks you to the ground, strikes you blind, that's a dramatic conversion experience? And yet, despite Saul's dramatic conversion experience, his journey toward becoming a fully devoted follower of Jesus was exactly that. It was a journey. It was a process, a lifelong process. And I want to talk about that journey tonight because there are markers and milestones on that journey that mark our progress. And there are places where we need to check in, places where we need to go on the road to becoming fully devoted followers of Jesus. And it's those places I want to talk about tonight. And the journey toward becoming a fully devoted follower of Jesus begins at a place called belief. A place called belief. The first step toward becoming a fully devoted follower of Jesus is to become a believer. Not a believer, a believer. Although believers can be believers too. Now, if you have no idea what a believer is, it means you are old and it doesn't matter, so just move on. But this is the first step in the journey toward becoming a fully devoted follower of Jesus. Now, I remember when I was growing up as a kid, I was fully convinced that Father Christmas was the one who brought our presents every year. I was hooked. I was convinced that Father Christmas would arrive every Christmas Eve. He would land with his sleigh on the roof, and he wouldn't have a chimney, so I assumed he came in through a window or a door, but he was the guy who brought out gifts every single year. And I remember one Christmas Eve going to bed. I was about maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I was very excited, as most kids are, and eventually I fell asleep, but I woke up in the middle of the night. And when I woke up, I noticed that the passage light was still on. And I thought, well, that's strange because usually my parents put the passage light off when they went to bed. So I thought to myself, well, maybe it's Santa. Maybe I'm going to catch him in the act. And so I got out of bed and I went down the passage and I walked into the lounge, the living room, and there sitting on the floor wrapping presents was my mother, my grandmother, and my older sister. Dancer, Prancer, and Rudy the Red-Nosed, all right? And I don't know who was more stunned, them or me. But that was the day the dream died. And that belief came to an end. And of course, throughout our childhood, we all developed these beliefs. And some of these beliefs are quite weird and wonderful. Like I remember growing up as a kid believing that if you swallowed chewing gum, it would stay in your stomach because you couldn't digest it and you couldn't pass it. And if you swallowed enough chewing gum, eventually a big ball of chewing gum would end up in your stomach. Anybody else believe that as a kid? And I believed the same about fruit seeds. I believed that if you swallowed fruit seeds, they would sit in your stomach and a tree would grow. So I was terrified of fruit seeds and I would always spit them out because I didn't want to swallow them. And I believed that if you pulled a funny face and you held it, when the clock struck 12, your face would stay that way, right? Come on. Now, I blame my mother for all those beliefs, but I don't actually know where they really came from. But we all have these unusual childhood beliefs that we eventually grow up and grow out of, and they're fairly innocuous. They don't shape us. They don't make us the people we are. But the older we get, the more important our beliefs become, and we do develop beliefs that do shape us and do mold us and do make us. And hands down, the single most important belief any human being can develop over the course of their lifetime is the belief that they hold in their heart about God. Because what you believe about God will determine how you relate to God. And how you relate to God will determine what you receive from God. Your experience of God, to a large extent, is going to be determined by your expectation of God, and that is informed by your belief. And that's why the writer to the Hebrews penned these words in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. He says, it is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. If you want to become a fully devoted follower of Jesus, it has to begin at that point of belief. And not only do you have to believe that God exists, but you have to believe that he is good, that he is loving and he is generous and that his heart is inclined toward you, that he really wants to reward you. Those who diligently seek him, that he wants to pour his blessing and his favor on your life, that he's a good God. And he's a great God. And I don't know about you, but I was raised in an environment where that kind of belief was nurtured. Both my parents are devout followers of Jesus. And from as young as I can remember, they encouraged us toward that belief. This belief that God is there and God is good and God is great. And God is most preeminently revealed in the person of his son, Jesus. And if you want to know who God is and what God thinks and what God values, you only need to look at Jesus. And sure, I grew up, eventually, and my critical thinking developed. And I went off to seminary and I studied theology more formally, and some of those childhood beliefs, even about God, were challenged, and some of them were even changed. But that underlying belief that God is there and that God is good and that God is great and that he's revealed himself through the person of his son Jesus has never left me. It is the bedrock of my commitment to him, and for so many all over the world, it is the foundation of their commitment to Jesus, the place of belief. It's the starting point. It's the beginning point. And that's why in John chapter 1, verse 11 to 13, it says the following concerning Jesus. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and received him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. In other words, when you become a believer, it's like being born again. It's like getting a new lease on life. It's like getting a fresh start. It's like coming into the world for the first time. It's a brand new starting point in the journey to becoming a fully devoted follower of Jesus. The place of belief. But once you've come to that point of belief, you need to journey on. You need to go to the next place. And the next place in the journey to becoming a fully devoted follower of Jesus is a place called trust. A place called trust. And trust is very different from belief, because belief is for the most part passive. When we talk about belief, we're talking about the things that we hold to be right and true, our convictions. And so when we believe, we think and feel. But when we trust, we act. Trust is very personal, very practical, and very active. Let me explain it to you this way. We have a babysitter by the name of Bella. Because we have no family in the city, we lean quite heavily on friends and babysitters for childcare. And so we have a babysitter by the name of Bella, and she's a beautiful young lady in so many ways. She is intelligent and smart and responsible and reliable, and she has great character and great integrity. And we believe in Bella. We believe in her ability. We believe in her responsibility. We believe in her character. We believe in her trustworthiness. But until we actually hand over our children to Bella and place them in her care, we have not yet fully trusted her. And it actually doesn't matter how many people we tell about Bella and how much we boast about how wonderful she is and reliable she is and trustworthy she is and how integrous she is. Until we actually pass our children into her care, we have not yet fully trusted her. Trust is deeply personal and deeply practical and deeply active. It's kind of like bungee jumping. Anybody ever been bungee jumping? Anybody ever thrown yourself off a high place with a piece of string around your ankles? All right, good on you. I've never been bungee jumping before, but my wife has been bungee jumping. She actually has a pretty extreme fear of heights, and so she decided the best thing to do about that was to climb up on a bridge and jump off. I don't understand it, but that was her thinking. And so one year while we were on holiday in South Africa, we went down to a place called the Brookrans River Bridge, which is on the southeast coast of the country. And there's a large bridge there that spans a very deep ravine, and they have the world's highest commercial bungee jump. And so she decided she was going to go and do the bungee jump. And of course, I went along for moral support. And I wanted to capture it all on film because I figured if the bungee cord snaps, I could put it on YouTube, get 1 million hits overnight, and be famous, all right? I'm kidding, okay, I'm kidding, all right? Just having a dig at the culture. I love my wife, don't send me emails. So for those of you who've been bungee jumping, you'll know that they take quite a bit of time to prepare you for the jump. So they talk to you about the cord and how strong it is and how much weight it can carry and how many people have jumped before and the fact that there have been no casualties and no deaths. And they take quite a bit of time to prepare you for the jump because they want you to believe in the cord. They want you to believe in the cord. But how many of you know until you actually get up to the edge and take the leap, you cannot trust the cord? You can believe the cord for as long as you want. You can believe in it as much as you like. But it is only when you walk up to the edge of the bridge and take the leap and fall over the edge that you put your trust in the cord. Trust is very different from belief. It's very personal, it's very practical, and it is very active. And when you choose a life of trust, it's a very different way of living. And that's why in John chapter 8, there's an interesting statement made about Jesus and by Jesus in a certain situation. Listen to what it says, John 8, verse 30 to 32. It says, then many who heard him say these things believed in him. Jesus said to the people who believed in him, you are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teaching, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Isn't that interesting? Here Jesus is talking to a group of people who have been identified as believers. And he says to the believers, if you truly want to be my disciples, if you really want to follow me, you want to be a fully devoted follower of mine, then you are going to have to be faithful to my teaching. In other words, what he's saying is, I'm glad you believe. It's great that you believe, but if you really want to be my follower, if you really want to be my disciple, you are going to have to be faithful to my teaching, which is another way of saying you are going to have to trust that what I'm telling you is true. And you're going to have to be willing to take that teaching and apply it to your life and live by my wisdom, not your wisdom. You're going to have to be willing to live by my way, not your way. You are going to have to build your life on the patterns and principles of my word, not the patterns and principles of this world. And living a life of trust in Jesus is a very different way of living. Not everybody's going to understand it. It's very countercultural. It's very counterintuitive. It's very unconventional. And sometimes it'll even get you into trouble. And that's why Peter, who was another devout follower of Jesus, writes these words in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 19. And he's writing to Christians who are being persecuted for their faith. And he says this, so, if you are suffering in a manner that pleases God, keep on doing what is right and trust your lives to the God who created you, for he will never fail you. Do you see what he's saying there? He's saying, I understand your suffering. I know you're facing opposition. I know there's adversity and persecution coming your way because of your commitment to Jesus, but keep on doing the right thing. And the right thing is the God thing. It's the thing God wants you to do in any given situation. It's the wisdom of God. It's the way of God. It's the truth of God. Keep doing the right thing, because if you keep doing the right thing, God will never let you fail. He will not allow those who put their trust in Him to be put to shame. So keep doing the right thing. You know, earlier Dave was talking about generosity and giving as being a priority that we build into the fabric of our lives. And you know, underlying that call to that priority is this essential difference between believing and trusting. Because it's one thing to say, I believe God can be my provider. It's another thing altogether to say, God, I'm willing to trust that you will be my provider. And when you weave generosity into the fabric of your life, when you make giving a priority of your life, what you are essentially declaring is, God, not only do I believe you can be my provider, but I trust that you will be my provider by putting the needs of others ahead of myself. It's a very different way of living, very radical way of living. Do the right thing, the God thing, and He will never let you fail. And this conviction not only resided in the heart of Peter, but it certainly resided in the heart of Paul. And we see this expressed in 2 Timothy 1, verse 11 to 12. He says this, and God chose me to be a preacher, an apostle, and a teacher of this good news. That is why I am suffering here in prison. But I'm not ashamed of it, for I know the one in whom I trust. And I am sure that He is able to guard what I have entrusted to Him until the day of His return. Isn't that a profound statement? Paul's writing from jail. He's writing from prison. And he says, I'm not ashamed of the fact that I'm in prison for the sake of my devotion to Jesus, because I know the one that I have trusted. And I know that He's able to take care of what I've entrusted to Him, even my very life. And sometimes following Jesus, taking His word at face value, being faithful to His teaching will get you into trouble. Even with the law. Sometimes it'll get you behind bars, in trouble with the local authorities. People won't always understand it, won't always make sense. It cuts across the grain of culture. It is unconventional. But the reason why Paul could say, I'm not ashamed and I'm happy to be here for Jesus' sake, is because he was not only a believer, and not only had he learned to trust God, but Paul had been to the third place in the journey toward becoming a fully devoted follower of Jesus. And that place is the place of allegiance. The place of allegiance. Undivided loyalty, complete commitment, absolute surrender to Jesus as Lord and King. The place of allegiance. And friends, the place of allegiance is the ultimate destination in the journey toward becoming a fully devoted follower of Jesus. Over in Acts chapter 17, there's a wonderful story. In fact, well, you know the book of Acts is full of brilliant stories. But there's a story about Paul and Silas, and they're on their second missionary journey. And they're traveling through Asia Minor, and they're preaching the good news that Jesus is alive and Jesus is Lord, and they're upsetting a whole lot of people along the way. And the Jewish religious leaders are trying to get hold of them. And so Paul and Silas are ducking and diving. They're trying to keep a low profile. They're hiding. They're trying to avoid this persecution. And so it says in verse 5 to 7 of Acts 17, it says, but some of the Jews were jealous. So they gathered some of the troublemakers from the marketplace to form a mob and start a riot. They attacked the home of Jason, searching for Paul and Silas so they could drag them out to the crowd. Not finding them there, they dragged out Jason and some of the other believers instead and took them before the city council. Paul and Silas have caused trouble all over the world, they shouted. How many of you know if your devotion to Jesus isn't causing trouble somewhere, it's probably not full devotion? Now they are disturbing our city too. And Jason has welcomed them into his home. They are all guilty of treason against Caesar, for they profess allegiance to another king named Jesus. Allegiance to King Jesus. Loyalty to the Lord. That is the ultimate destination in the journey toward becoming a fully devoted follower. And friends, the good news we proclaim, the gospel message we announce is that Jesus is Lord and Jesus is alive. Earth has a new king. There is a new ruler, and his name is Jesus. And he is righteous, and he is just, and he is fair, and he will rule this world with a rod of iron. He will rule with fairness and justice and truth and righteousness. And that is good news news, because if you look at the political landscape and the economic landscape, it is so hard to find a leader worth following today. If you are sick of Donald Trump and you're up to here with Justin Trudeau and you've had enough of Jacob Zuma and you can't handle Robert Mugabe anymore, the good news is you have another option, and his name is Jesus. And he is the Lord of all creation. He is the Lord of all the earth, and he is kind and loving and fair and gracious, and he is coming back to restore this earth back to what it ought to be and to lead the nations of the world the way they deserve to be led. And he alone deserves our allegiance. He alone deserves our loyalty. And you know, there's some things I've discovered about loyalty over the years. Loyalty isn't loyalty until it's tested. Loyalty isn't loyalty until it's tested. How many Fremantle Dockers supporters do we have in the room tonight? Give me an enthusiastic wave. All right, quite a few. So 2 weeks ago, the Fremantle Dockers played the Sydney Swans and they lost by 104 points. Then last week, they played the Richmond Tigers and they lost again by 104 points. 2 weeks in a row. Now, let me ask you this question, Fremantle Dockers supporters. Did you throw away your membership tickets? Did you burn your jumpers? Did you throw away your flags? Did you walk away from your team? No. Why not? Because you are loyal, and your loyalty has been severely tested, but you have proven faithful. Come on. Loyalty isn't loyalty until it's tested. And your loyalty to Jesus will be tested. You know, one of my favorite stories in the Bible is in the Old Testament of 3 boys called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so we'll call them Rakshak and Benny because that's a little easier. And these 3 Hebrew boys, in the prime of their youth, in their young adulthood, they grew up in Israel, in Jerusalem, and they were taken captive when King Nebuchadnezzar overran Jerusalem, took the city, and led them into exile in Babylon. And these 3 bright, brilliant young boys in the prime of their life were taken into Nebuchadnezzar's palace to serve him. And over the course of time, Nebuchadnezzar built a golden image of himself. And he erected it, and he said to them, on a certain time of the day, I'm going to blow a horn, and everybody in the nation needs to fall down and worship this golden image of me. And so everybody did except these 3 Hebrew boys, Rakshak and Benny. And word got back to the king, and Nebuchadnezzar called these boys into his palace, and he said to them, listen, I'm giving you one more chance. I'm going to blow the horn, and you're going to fall down, and you're going to worship this golden image. And if you don't, I will throw you in the fiery furnace, and I will burn you alive. And the response that these 3 boys made has to be one of my favorite statements in the whole Bible. And it's recorded for us in Daniel chapter 3, verse 13 to 18. Listen what happens. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power. We believe that he can. We trust that he will. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods, nor worship the gold statue that you have set up. Friends, that is allegiance. That is loyalty. We believe God can provide. We trust that he will, but even if he doesn't. We believe God can heal. We will trust him to heal, but even if he doesn't. We know God can deliver, and we will trust him to deliver, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow to anyone other than Jesus as Lord and King and ruler. We will not bow to the culture, and we will not bow to popularity, and we will not bow to peer pressure, and we will not bow to money, and we will not bow the knee to comfort and convenience and safety and security. We will bow our knee to the name of Jesus and to him alone, because he alone deserves our loyalty. And loyalty isn't loyalty until it's tested. And your loyalty to Jesus will be tested. When your boss comes along and he says, I want you to pay a bribe to that government official so that we can land this contract, your loyalty to Jesus will be tested. Every time temptation comes your way and you have to resist, your loyalty to Jesus is being tested. And loyalty isn't loyalty until it's tested. The other thing I've discovered about loyalty is that loyalty isn't loyalty unless it lasts a lifetime. Loyalty isn't loyalty unless it lasts a lifetime. And I love this statement in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 14. It says this, for if we are faithful to the end, trusting God just as firmly as when we first believed, we will share in all that belongs to Christ. Is that not a profound statement? We will inherit and share in all that belongs to Christ if we are faithful and loyal to the very end, to the final breath, to our last day on earth. If we are faithful and loyal, we will share in all that is Christ's. If we hold to our faith, if we trust Him as firmly as when we first believed. What a profound promise. What a wonderful hope. What a wonderful gift. And you know what I love about that statement we've just read in Hebrews is that it captures in a single verse the three elements of full devotion to Jesus: belief, trust, and allegiance. Belief, trust, and allegiance. And of course, belief has to come first, because you will not trust a God you don't believe in. And you will not pledge allegiance to a God you don't trust. And so these three things coming together is critical. And in the Bible, we have a word for the composite net effect of these three things coming together. And it is the word faith. Whenever you come across the word faith, whenever you come across the concept or the idea of faith, you are reading about belief, trust, and allegiance. And wherever you have faith, you have the promise of life, the promise of salvation, the promise of sharing in all that is Christ's. To believe is good. To trust is better. But to pledge allegiance is best. It's where the life is.